In the annals of ancient history, few names evoke the complex interplay between brilliance and tragedy as powerfully as that of Pyrrhus of Epirus. Born in 319 BCE in the rugged highlands of Epirus, a region straddling parts of modern-day Albania and Greece, Pyrrhus emerged as one of the most formidable military commanders of his era. His legacy, however, is indelibly marked not only by his tactical genius, but also by the sobering lessons his campaigns imparted about the true price of victory. To understand Pyrrhus, one must first appreciate the world in which he lived. The 3rd century BCE was a time of immense upheaval and shifting alliances. The once mighty Greek world was fractured, its city-states often embroiled in internecine strife or seeking ways to preserve their autonomy against rising powers. Meanwhile, in the Italian peninsula to the west, a new force was steadily making its mark: Rome. Having subdued its immediate neighbors, Rome was now casting its gaze southward toward the prosperous and culturally rich Greek colonies of Magna Graecia. Cities such as Tarentum, which flourished along the sun-drenched coasts of southern Italy. The citizens of these Greek cities, proud of their Hellenic heritage, viewed the encroachment of Rome with growing alarm. Their armies, though valiant, were no match for the disciplined, ever-expanding legions of Rome. In desperation, the city of Tarentum reached out across the Ionian Sea to Pyrrhus, beseeching him to come to their aid. They sought not merely a general, but a savior, someone who could stem the tide of Roman conquest and preserve the autonomy of the Greek world in Italy. Pyrrhus, for his part, was no stranger to ambition. A cousin of Alexander the Great, he had long nursed dreams of emulating his illustrious relative. The call from Tarentum presented him with both a challenge and an opportunity. Here, at last, was a theater in which to test his mettle against a rising power, to carve his name into the marble of history. He eagerly accepted the invitation, assembling a formidable army that included not only experienced Epirote warriors, but also a contingent of war elephants, beasts that had struck terror into the hearts of soldiers from India to Egypt. In 280 BCE, Pyrrhus landed on the shores of Italy, his forces gleaming beneath the Mediterranean sun. The stage was set for a clash that would echo through the centuries. The first major confrontation came at Heraclea. The Roman army, confident in its organization and discipline, advanced to meet Pyrrhus's host. But they had never before faced the likes of him or his elephants. With tactical brilliance, Pyrrhus unleashed his war beasts, sowing chaos in the Roman ranks. The Greek phalanx pressed forward, and the Romans, caught off guard by the unfamiliar threat, were forced to retreat. The field belonged to Pyrrhus, yet as he surveyed the aftermath, the victory rang hollow. Some 4,000 of his finest soldiers lay dead or dying, many of them irreplaceable veterans. The Romans, too, had suffered, but their losses could be replenished from the seemingly endless reserves of their citizenry. Pyrrhus is said to have remarked with poignant insight, "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined." This was no empty boast or mere lamentation. Pyrrhus understood, perhaps more keenly than anyone, that the cost of victory could sometimes outweigh its benefits. Undeterred, Pyrrhus pressed on. The following year, he met the Romans again at Asculum. This time, the fighting was even fiercer. The Romans had learned from their earlier encounter. Their formations were tighter, their tactics more adaptable. Once more, Pyrrhus prevailed, but the toll was devastating. Many of his most capable officers fell in the carnage, their absence felt keenly in the days that followed. The ranks of his army began to thin, their morale sapped by the unrelenting attrition. Still, Pyrrhus refused to yield. He marched his battered army through the Italian countryside, seeking allies among the local tribes and hoping to replenish his ranks. But the promised reinforcements from Greece and Sicily were slow in coming, and the enthusiasm of his allies began to wane. Meanwhile, Rome absorbed its losses, conscripted new legions, and pressed forward with unshakable resolve. By 275 BCE, the momentum had shifted irrevocably. Pyrrhus, his army diminished and his hopes dashed, was forced to withdraw from Italy. He returned to Epirus, his dreams of a new Hellenic empire in the west shattered. His story ended a few years later, in 272 BCE, not on the fields of Italy, but in the streets of Argos, where he met a sudden and ignoble death during a skirmish, felled, according to legend, by a roof tile thrown by an old woman. In the wake of Pyrrhus's campaigns, Rome continued its inexorable march, eventually uniting all of Italy under its banner. The Greek cities that had once looked to Pyrrhus for salvation were absorbed into the burgeoning Roman Republic, their independence lost but their culture enduring in new and unexpected ways. Yet the true legacy of Pyrrhus lies not in the territories he conquered or the battles he fought, but in the lesson his life imparts. A lesson as relevant today as it was in the ancient world. The story of Pyrrhus is, above all, a cautionary tale about the distinction between tactical brilliance and strategic vision. Pyrrhus was, by all accounts, a master of battlefield maneuvers. His use of war elephants, his ability to inspire his troops, and his flair for seizing the initiative were the hallmarks of a great tactician. But his focus on immediate triumphs blinded him to the larger strategic picture. Victory for Pyrrhus was measured in battles won, not wars concluded. Rome, by contrast, understood the value of endurance. Its defeats were temporary setbacks, its resources seemingly inexhaustible. Each time it suffered a loss, it regrouped, rebuilt, and returned to the fray. Over time, this resilience proved decisive. Rome could afford to lose individual battles so long as it won the war. Pyrrhus, fighting far from home with limited means, could not. This brings us to the most enduring concept associated with Pyrrhus, the Pyrrhic Victory. In modern parlance, a Pyrrhic victory is one that comes at such a staggering cost that it is indistinguishable from defeat. The term has transcended the narrow confines of military history, finding resonance in realms as diverse as business, politics, and personal relationships. It serves as a stark reminder that not all victories are created equal, that sometimes the price we pay to win is simply too high. Consider, for example, a company that wins a lucrative contract by underbidding all its competitors, only to find that the cost of fulfilling the contract exceeds the profit it stands to make. Or a politician who secures election by making extravagant promises, only to discover that delivering on those promises is impossible without sacrificing core principles or alienating key supporters. In each case, the initial victory is soon soured by the realization that the true cost was hidden in the fine print. Pyrrhus's experience also highlights the critical importance of resources and logistics in any sustained endeavor. As a commander, he was far from his home base, reliant on fragile supply lines and the goodwill of allies whose loyalty could not always be counted on. Each loss in battle was a blow not merely to his numbers, but to his capacity to continue fighting. Rome, by contrast, fought on its own soil, drawing upon deep reservoirs of manpower and material. The difference proved decisive. Finally, the saga of Pyrrhus invites reflection on the nature of ambition and hubris. It is tempting to view Pyrrhus as a tragic hero, valiant, capable, but ultimately undone by forces beyond his control. Yet his downfall was also a product of his own choices. His desire to emulate Alexander the Great blinded him to the realities of his situation. He pursued glory with single-minded intensity, never pausing to ask whether the rewards justified the risks. In doing so, he became the architect of his own undoing. The lessons of Pyrrhus's life continue to reverberate through history. Military leaders, business executives, and statesmen alike would do well to heed his example. Tactical brilliance, while valuable, is no substitute for strategic foresight. Resources and endurance often matter more than ingenuity or daring. Most importantly, victory must always be measured not just by what is gained, but by what is lost in the process. In reflecting on the story of Pyrrhus, we are reminded that history is replete with examples of those who won the battle but lost the war, of those whose short-term successes sowed the seeds of long-term failure. The Pyrrhic victory endures as a symbol of this paradox, a warning to all who would pursue triumph at any cost. Yet, there is another dimension to Pyrrhus's legacy, one that speaks to the allure of heroism and the enduring appeal of the underdog. For all his flaws, Pyrrhus was a man of vision and courage, willing to stake everything on a bold gamble. His campaigns, though ultimately unsuccessful, inspired generations to dream of what might be achieved through audacity and determination. The very fact that his name is still remembered, more than 2 millennia after his death, is a testament to the power of his story. In the end, the saga of Pyrrhus is a meditation on the twin forces of aspiration and limitation. It is a story of what can be accomplished through skill and daring, but also of the dangers that lurk when ambition outpaces prudence. It asks us to consider the true meaning of victory, and to weigh carefully the costs we are willing to bear in its pursuit. As we look back upon the windswept battlefields of Heraclea and Asculum, as we imagine the proud, battered armies of Epirus facing the relentless legions of Rome, we are reminded that history is not merely a record of events, but a canvas upon which the dramas of human striving are eternally replayed. Pyrrhus, in his triumphs and in his defeats, offers us a mirror in which to see ourselves, not only as we wish to be, but as we truly are. His story endures, not simply as a tale of ancient warfare, but as a timeless caution, a reminder that the sweetest victories may carry the most bitter consequences, and that wisdom lies in knowing when to fight, when to yield, and when to count the true cost of our ambitions. In the end, perhaps the greatest tribute to Pyrrhus is that his name, and the lesson it embodies, have outlived the empires for which he fought. Long after the dust has settled on the fields of ancient Italy, and the echoes of battle have faded into history, the memory of Pyrrhus endures, a beacon, a warning, and an invitation to reflect on the nature of victory itself.